I'm Dr. Karin Huffer, and I'm here with Dr. Chuck Corry, who is going to be in this segment of our Unlocking Justice series, having to do mostly with veterans who are returned from deployment and who are struggling with legal systems and who may need special accommodations and advocacy. We find, unfortunately, that many of our veterans who have gone overseas and fought for due process of law and justice, when they come home, are literally locked out of justice. So we definitely want to unlock justice for these people, and that's what Dr. Chuck Corry is doing. So Chuck, what is it you're seeing as the biggest problem, or at least one of the biggest problems that you deal with, because you're a hands-on helper for these people?
Well, certainly the biggest problem is simply the immense numbers. The Associated Press recently published an article showing that 45% of the returning OEF veterans, that's Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, are applying for disabilities, multiple disabilities. Almost all of those have some form of post-traumatic stress disorder. And when they act out from their disability, they're angry, they're mistreated. A lot of times they drink to try to cover up their problems, and they get involved in the justice system in immense numbers. In El Paso County in Colorado, 3,200 a year are arrested. Unfortunately, most of them get convicted. Once convicted, it's impossible for them to find a job. The largest percentage of those convictions involve domestic violence, because PTSD looks like domestic violence. There's the irrational anger, the acting out, putting their hands around their wife or girlfriend's throat. Even in their sleep they do this. The flashbacks, all of these look like domestic violence. So 30 to 40% of the arrests are domestic violence, and most of them are convicted because they're unfamiliar with the justice system. So we have thousands of these every year, and once you have a conviction like that, you're basically a dead man walking. You can't find homes, kids are generally taken away from them, they're rearrested time after time. Outcome is typically suicide. A lot of times it leads to more violent crimes, so we see an excessive number of homicides, about 17 to 20 a year just in El Paso County. Now, El Paso County is anomalous in the sense that we have 5 military bases. That's more than any other county in the country has in one section. And Fort Carson has been at ground zero for these problems with PTSD for a decade now. Many investigations, congressional investigations, Army investigations, books written about it, many articles written about it, Rolling Stone, PBS has done specials on it. So we're sitting at ground zero for these problems, and the estimates, although the Army doesn't want to admit it, is that about 30% of these returning troops have PTSD or will develop PTSD, and about 20% of them are suffering from some level of traumatic brain injury, TBI.
And sometimes both.
Well, if they have TBI, we almost always find that they have PTSD as well.
Right.
And another problem with the PTSD is that post-traumatic means post. It doesn't show up immediately. It can show up decades later. Some life threatening, or a divorce in their 40s, lose a child, something like that can bring on the PTSD. So what we see is, if they get in the justice system, basically they stay in the justice system, and after age 50, virtually every inmate in the county jail is a veteran.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, when these people come home, if we understood if we were trained properly, those in the criminal justice system, civil, wherever, if they're trained properly to pick up the symptoms of PTSD and TBI, we could virtually head off many of these arrests and many of these tragic consequences.
We can, in a sense. My sympathies are often with the frontline officers, police. They respond to these calls, and under current laws, arrest is mandatory. And a lot of times the only option the police officer has is an arrest. But these people are severely troubled, and the police are very hampered by the laws and by
They're following what they're told to do.
Well, you know,
what
even
they
as a
see.
police officer, you know, you got somebody that's angry, violent, drunk, armed. What's the police officer to do?
Well, let me throw out something to you. You know, I'm in the business of attempting to accommodate impairments and offset the impairments the best we can to normalize the person's behavior. So one thing that I'm wondering, and I don't think I see enough attention given to, is that if you have post-traumatic stress disorder or a related brain problem, usually there's an area in the brain called Broca's area that is involved, and it interferes with expressive speech. Now, if you can't express yourself through speech, the next thing you do is act your feelings. So many times I think these people, if they had an advocacy, at least concept, helping them to express what they're feeling at the time through words, and sometimes that means an advocate helping speak for them, they may not have to act out so much.
Well, one of the things, we helped pioneer the Veteran Court in Colorado Springs in 2008 and helped get the legislation passed in 2010 enabling these courts. And since the outset, what we've been proposing and requiring is a mentor, or what they now call a peer specialist. That's a veteran who works with this veteran like a battle buddy.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's somebody besides the police who can be called when they start acting out.
And help to communicate.
And help to communicate, quiet down the situation. Veterans will only interact really with veterans. You need somebody there besides the police who understands the problem. A lot of our, well, particularly in the Sheriff's Department, 60% of them are veterans, so they understand it. I think only about 30% of the Colorado Springs police are veterans. So you really have to have a veteran that understands this, that can deal with it vet to vet. And we've realized that all along, but when I found out about your work, I was really excited because I'd really like to see these peer specialists and mentors trained with ADA advocacy.
And
So that
know
they
how
can,
to get accommodations and know how to intervene so that they're protected under the federal mandate.
yes,
They've earned that at least.
yes, because as I was saying, the police have little option but to arrest. So now they're in the system. And in El Paso County, the only central point that we have, all of the 5 bases, all of the 5 police departments, all use the Central County Jail. So we have a central point. So logistics dictate that they're in there. But now they're in the system, and now you've got to involve the district attorney. So we also need to train the district attorney. We did have a veteran who had jail access who was talking to some of these. But the scale is a problem too. I mean, 3,200 arrests a year. About 2,000 of those are misdemeanors, and that's where you really need to catch them, is when they first get into the system. You know, before they've committed a felony, before they've attempted murder, before they've attempted suicide. And so getting these advocates to them as quickly as possible is a logistical problem, and enough advocates too.
Mm-hmm. And how to get the advocates paid for, available, trained, and ready. veterans need to be trained in the 8 steps that I have, or how, what the manual teaches, how to get accommodations for somebody. I really do want to link up something with the Department of Justice with what's happening here. There has to be a way of doing that, and I'm going to be following up with you on that.
Well, anything we can do. Right now, Health and Human Services has been funding these veteran courts, but they've been using the drug court model, and it's been basically throwing money away. Because a drug court, first of all, requires a guilty plea before you can get into the court, and then drug treatment is entirely inappropriate for these cases.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, this needs its own design.
And in tracking the veteran arrests, only 13% of the charges against these veterans, and now I have over 6,000 arrests, involve drug or substance abuse. So it's not a significant problem in the arrests of these veterans. So we need an entirely different model.
So that assumption is just false, that people make, that they come home and they're on drugs. And
Well, very frequently they are. You know, we come back, any trooper worth of salt is going to go out and start drinking. They're going to get drunk, but we're not seeing it. You know, the 21-year-old out drinking. We're seeing average age on active duty is, the median age is 26 in the arrest records. These are people that have been in combat a bunch of times, not somebody that just turned 21 and is feeling their wild oats. So,
well, I sure admire what you do. And
well, thank you,
so
and happy to come back anytime.
Hey, you're going to be asked. Thank you so much.